Hello, Bert here. So my previous book video was sort of best books I read in 2021. And so now I want to talk about books that I don't want to call them the worst books I read in 2021. They're more books that I just rated much differently than other people did. And so I just wanted to talk about those books a little bit. This first book, Wizard's First Rule. So you see it's got a 4.12 average rating on Goodreads. I gave it a 1 star. Some of these other books I'm going to talk about, I understand why they got the ratings they did. I do. This is the one book where I'm absolutely dumbfounded. Like, I just don't understand. Very wooden characters. Very archetypal characters. They're meant to fit a particular role and act within that role. Some absolutely cringeworthy dialogue between people. A really poorly done romance, and then even the action was like laughable. I remember there's this one guy who's sort of this super bad like ranger in the woods, and he's carrying like 40 weapons, and I'm like, I just from a weight standpoint, I don't care how big and strong this guy is, like, why would you carry around so many weapons that would weigh you down like that? But I mean, okay, it's I'm getting into the minutiae here. I mean, overall, this whole book, the story arc and everything else about it, I just was like shaking my head the whole time. I mean, it was a really like not well written book, and not a very compelling story, and so I was really shocked by this one. All right, I don't want to make this like a bash fest, so I really want to talk about the differences between what I thought and what other people thought. But like I said, this one was just a little bit. I was definitely dumbfounded by this one and its review. All right. Or rating, I should say. So the rating for Song of Achilles, 4.41. I gave it 2 stars. I liked the idea of this book. The writing wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible. And I actually had fun in the beginning. It's kind of, this fleshing out sort of these mythological characters. And then it got into the middle, and Patroclus and Achilles start this relationship. And I felt like sort of a modern day, or not even modern day, maybe like a 50s or 60s morality was being like pushed onto this book, where they were living in abject fear that people are going to find out about their homosexual relationship. And I'm like, ancient Greece? Like, I mean, this is the same place that had the Sacred Band of Thebes, right? 150 couples, men, that fought together in battle. And, Spartans, I mean, they were basically required to, form these relationships, younger men with older men. That was both like a military mentorship, but also, a sexual relationship. And so I just had this problem with, ancient Greece and, this, what did not seem to be an authentic view of homosexuality placed on this book. And then I also had problems with, Patroclus is supposed to be this pretty good warrior in the Iliad, right? And he takes on, one of the top warriors, Sarpedon, and from Troy, and kills him. And then in this book, he's kind of like this very sort of tender, human being that's concerned with healing others, right? And just does not know how to fight, doesn't want to fight. And then he goes out in Achilles' armor and kills Sarpedon, just like complete luck. And I'm like, okay, come on, like that's not the story, right? And so there were a lot of things about this book that just I had a hard time with. I could have given it 3 stars too, I guess. But I wanted a lot more out of the book, and I think that's part of why I was just really disappointed and gave it 2 stars. I get why people like it, and I still actually want to read, I want to read the Circe book by her. Like it didn't make me not want to read her, but this book just, I don't know, it just bothered me for, like I said, a couple different reasons. All right, next one, Gentleman in Moscow, 4.34 stars. I gave it 2. I would recommend this book to certain people, right? It's got this sort of, fine wine and literature, and, and it's even got this like sort of hallmarky or high level hallmark, moments in relationship. But it's about a guy who is sort of an archetypal gentleman, nobility from Russia. And the whole book takes place in a hotel. I mean, and you can have stories that take place in one setting. I think 12 Angry Men is a great story. It takes place in a jury room, right? Um, this just was it was excruciatingly slow to listen to. Thank God I listened to it. I couldn't have read it. And I feel like they could have done so much more with the history, right? It's like this time period from Russian Revolution to, post World War II, and there's so much history there, and it's just sort of like tangentially like touched on. I mean, I guess part is because they're in a hotel the whole time. I mean, it was a tough read for me, but again, there are people that I would recommend this to, and could have. I mean, again, this is one that maybe would have been a 3-star if I had been on a different day, but for me, this book did not work. All right, the next one, The Shadow of What Was Lost. Very tropey. There's this character who's amazingly powerful but doesn't know it, finds their powers. A little bit of the hero's journey, right? The Joseph Campbell thing, finds the mentor, teaches him. And there's sort of these gaps in the book where they're trying to. I mean, there's one of the characters is purposely erases his own memory, and then this other character, there's a lot he doesn't know that's going on, and so, I don't mind gaps sometimes, but I felt like this was more of a gimmicky sort of thing. And then, of course, there's the big siege at the end, and they're about to lose, and there's no way they can win. And then last minute, somebody comes through and like literally comes out of the sky and like rains death upon everybody, and they withstand, this attack. And I was just like, I read it pretty quick. I will say it was entertaining, but like, there's nothing about this that made me want to finish the series. So, and it's not poorly written. I think some people would really like this. And if you just love fantasy and you just want to read about different fantasy worlds, have at it. I don't think the characters were the greatest. And I think the storyline was very, very, like I said, full of tropes. But again, some people might like it. All right, I know there's going to be a lot of people who disagree with this one. So Mistborn, right? I had a hard time, and this is going to sound so stupid, but I had a really hard time with rolling the eyes. Triple digits, it was written into this book that somebody would say something and then roll their eyes. And I'm thinking to myself, isn't there an editor somewhere that's like, hey, Brandon, you got to take out some of these rolling of the eyes? And I think it's just indicative of it was very much a YA novel, right? It was had kind of that snarky like dialogue to it. And it had the, again, you want to talk about tropes, the orphan girl who has these amazing powers that she didn't know about, and she works a little bit and she's suddenly better than everybody else. And I'm like, okay, I don't like that, right? If you saw my other video, like I want people to work really hard for whatever it is they get. And so when that happens, I'm just like, okay, this is the standard fantasy trope, standard YA fantasy trope, right? And I don't think this is supposed to be a YA book, but it very much comes across as one. I do like some of the characters. The world building was a little bit like soft, but I enjoyed it. Like, I thought it was kind of a cool place. I do not think this was a 4-star book. And again, this could be another one of those ones, 3-star maybe on a good day, 2.5. But some people recommended this to me because I was like, I'm reading Way of the Kings and I love it. And I picked this up and I'm like, this has got to be early Sanderson before, because Way of the Kings is really great. And this is not really great, in my opinion. So at any rate, and then the last book. So this one, so if this was one of my kids, I'd be like, hey man, you wrote a theme, but you didn't really stick to it. And that's kind of how this was. This guy's theme is that American generalship's gotten worse because generals aren't getting fired. And he, goes through this whole thing sort of talking about generals that got fired in World War II and gives these almost like mini bios. It's actually pretty informative, and I learned some new stuff. But then, he gets into like Korea, and he talks a little bit about the firings that happened, but they only happened at the end, and they weren't really valid because of this. And then he gets into Vietnam and talks about how, well, yeah, there was this one general that was firing everybody, but that, that's not really what needed to be done in that case. And I'm like, well, I thought that was your theme, your thesis, right? And then he gets into like modern day Iraq and Afghanistan, and I think it fell off the rails there. He's talking about how these generals, should, regardless of what civilian leadership said, they should do this. And I'm like, that's not how the army works. It's not in America, right? Like, the civilians are the senior people in control, and you've got to stay with that. Right? Like, that's what makes this democracy work. So at any rate, I think this book fell flat. I enjoyed it. I learned some stuff. But 2 stars. I think it was worth the read. I just don't think that he proved his idea. So, all right, that's it. Those are my books, 2021. Ones where I rated really low that other people rated high. I wouldn't call them worst books. And some of them I'm glad I read. I was just surprised that I was so far off. All right, well, that's it, and happy trails.